Hello and welcome to Coffee Club episode number 1, which might be confusing to some people because we already had an episode, but we're Java people, so that was episode 0 and this is episode 1. So just to remind you, in episode 0 we introduced ourselves, so we're just going to do a really quick intro here because we don't need to introduce ourselves properly. Hello, I'm Trisha.
Hi, I'm Dalia.
Hi, I'm Helen.
I have to remember to unmute myself. Hi, I'm Mala. Doing it again.
We should do a buzzword bingo for how many times one of us has to say, oh, I'm on mute. So today we're going to be talking about leveling up using non-technical skills and excuse me, leveling up using non-technical skills. And what I want to say right now is that the whole point about this show and the fact that it's live is to try and be interactive and try and get people kind of engaged and asking questions. I assume that at the beginning there won't be loads of questions because I'm assuming that you won't know what we're talking about. But feel free to ask questions in the chat at any time. And what we will do is we will try and stop periodically and answer some questions. And we're also trying to allow time at the end of the session for questions or stuff which might be slightly off topic. So do feel free to ask questions at any point in time. We might answer it in the chat. We might answer as we go. We'll just kind of wing it and see how it goes. That's how we roll around here. So yes, ask questions whenever you want. And then the other thing I want to do before we really get into the session is to talk about, like, why do we in particular care about this topic? Why do we care about the non-technical skills? I'm not going to go first because I have loads of opinions and you're going to hear a lot from me, I think. So why don't we start with Mala? Why do you care about this topic?
I had a long career, and in my long career, I have seen that what matters more is the non-technical skills when we are talking about leveling up, because we are all humans. We love to interact with others, and we have problems like everyone else. And the non-technical skills are the ones which are the most kind of not taken care of by developers. We tend to, in our earlier years of careers, we tend to focus more on our technical skills. But as we move up the ladder, we realize that the non-technical skills are the ones that we should have been focusing on. And yes, I've realized it now. And of course, a lot of years since I was in my career. So yes, I'm here to talk about how anyone else who is listening to us can learn from our experiences and, of course, chalk their own path.
Helen, how about you?
Remember to unmute. Very similar to Mala in that a lot of it's from my own personal experience. I've seen what's happened when I've applied my so-called non-technical skills well, and I've learned from what happens when I've decided not to apply them for some reason. And just looking back at the start of my career, and I guess an element of naivety as well, given what I've learned from between the delta from then to now, and just how much and by how quickly and by how much they can improve and change your career prospects, not just in the company that you work, but potentially additional career opportunities as well. And it sounds a little bit wishy-washy, but the non-technical skills, once you kind of learn them and you get better at them, I found they've really improved the quality of my working day in a lot of respects.
And Dalia.
Yeah, I really like that you asked that question because I had to kind of think about it for a minute. And then I was thinking, when I first started my development career, I just was all focused on, okay, how can I learn this million-line code base? How can I get a hang of this? So that was my first goal. And then my second goal is I really want to get good at this. I want to, pick up and make sure my technical skills are all good to go. I can write Java really well, all the stuff. And then my eventual goal became, how can I grow? And how can I go to that next step and get better? And with that, I've discovered that it has a lot more to do with my non-technical skills than my technical skills. And as I've gotten my first promotion and then became dev lead, I became to appreciate that in order to take those steps, I had to really work on those non-technical skills. So, no one comes out and tells us that in university. They just kind of, you know, tell you like go off and be a good developer, but they are very important if you want to go further in your career. So I care a lot about talking about them.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I came out of, I've got sort of very classic developer background. I studied computer science at university. I did effectively an internship for Ford Motor Company. And then I was on their graduate program as well at Ford Motor Company. So when I joined them, I was like, I'm a pretty good developer for my age, because I've been doing Java at university, which a lot of people hadn't been at that time. And I've been programming before then. So I'm good at coding. And I think that should be enough for me to be good at my job. And I think my bosses and people around me should recognize that my skills as a developer, what make me valuable to this organization. But I was on this graduate training scheme, and they were like sending me to like management training and presentation skills and like all this other stuff, time management, all of these things. And I was like, I just don't really see how any of this is relevant, you know? And I would go to these marketing presentations where they'd say like what the sales numbers were for the month. And I'm like, this is not relevant to me. I just write code. But that's like 20 years ago. And over the last 20 years, it has become more and more clear to me that, of course, you need to understand, is the business doing well? What are the things that we did that impact the business? You understand that you need things like, you can call them presentation skills or whatever, but like if you want to sell your peers on a design or an idea that you've got, if you want to do things your way, Helen, to come back to your point, if you want to be happier in your day, if you want to be if you want to be more successful but happier, you have to have these other types of skills. You need to be able to talk to people. You need to be able to I was going to use the word manipulate, but it's not. You need to understand how people work, and that's these non-technical skills. So one of the things we're going to do in this episode is obviously we're going to cover what we mean by non-technical skills and list a bunch of them. But I also want to cover things like, so why don't we start with that? So why don't we start with what do we mean by non-technical skills? And I want to start a little bit with a conversation with Helen, because before you joined us at JetBrains, you wrote this really great blog post about, I can't remember what the title was, but it was like why you hate the fact that it's called soft skills or something. So I want you to talk a little bit about that.
It wasn't quite as why do you hate the so-called why do we hate calling them soft skills, but it was can we please stop calling them soft skills, because I've never understood it. And I actually pulled up the blog post just before we came on the stream, and because I knew I'd put in the blog post where that actually came from, because it was it originated back in the army in 1972, but unfortunately the link to the PDF has died. But I've never understood why they're called soft skills, because soft implies cute, fluffy, easy, and they're not. They're none of the above. So I've had this bee in my bonnet for as long as I can remember, because they're not just hard and difficult to master, but they're super, super important to master. And when you do master them, you find yourself and your career taking big strides forward, where otherwise previously you weren't making much progress. So I think for me, well, firstly, I've never understood why they're called soft skills, but I understand that it's kind of steeped in history. But secondly, I think they're really, really hard, and we should invest in them. We shouldn't just assume that everyone is good at these skills, because I've never met anybody who rolls off a degree or self-taught or apprenticeship or whatever route into development that we take. We're not usually amazing at all of these skills from the get-go. That's the second mute.
Why don't you give me 2 or 3 non-technical skills, the sorts of things that we're going to be talking about in this episode? And we'll go into this in depth a bit later, but why don't you just give us some of those non-technical skills? Can
I do a Trisha and give you 5?
Yes.
Okay, good. Right. Number 1, communication. Number 2, empathy. Number 3, respect. Number 4, integrity. And number 5, authenticity.
Oh, I like them. Okay.
Top 5.
I was going to ask Dalia, but she got a mouthful of coffee. Dalia, have you got? And what do you mean when you're talking about non-technical skills? What have you got in your head?
Yeah, definitely communication skills, problem-solving skills, working well with others, things along those lines. And a lot of times I think about I've been in positions where I've recommended other people to leadership positions, and I never sat down and thought, okay, do they know how to solve this algorithm well? I always thought, okay, are they going to be good to work with? Are they going to lead in a way that's healthy and effective? Are they like, it's always been questions that have to do with non-technical, because you assume that they have the technical skills if they're in a position to even go to the next level. It's the next level requires those non-technical skills. And I would definitely want to dive into that a little bit more later.
Mala, what do you think of when you think about non-technical skills? Just a handful, and we'll go into them in a bit more detail.
So I don't want to talk about the list of skills. I would like to talk about the bigger task or the bigger goals that a set of non-technical skills would let anyone achieve. Let's say if we talk about leadership skills, so what are the non-technical skills anyone would need to be a leader, like getting over the fear of failure, trying out new things. If we talk about that could be also about the communication. So we are talking about multiple skills that we could talk about in different scenarios, depending on what we want to achieve.
I stopped paying attention for 1 second because I wanted to look at what my next question was, and now I don't know what my next question was either. We've actually touched on this a little bit, like these skills that we're talking about. Well, actually, let me skip a little bit. We've talked about leveling up, so let's talk about I guess 2 things really. Like, how can these sorts of skills help us to level up, and why do we want to level up? Because I think these 2 things are kind of related, because I know there are plenty of developers out there who are comfortable doing their job and they're good at their job, and they don't want to get pressured into, say, a management role, because we talked a little bit about growth and management and career paths and promotion. I know there are plenty of developers who don't necessarily want to go into management, don't necessarily want a lead position, but that's not the only thing we're talking about, are we, when we're talking about leveling up? We might be talking about team lead, we might be talking about architect or senior developer, but we might just be talking about like being more comfortable in your own skin, being able to express those technical skills that you have, being able to communicate those technical ideas that you have, and also use some of these so-called non-technical skills. I think we've seen a little bit of this on chat, in order to find those types of jobs where we can really grow and be ourselves. So has anyone got any thoughts on, like, what do we mean by leveling up, and why these skills are the important ones for helping us to level up?
I think for me, a lot of times I talk to like my friends that are in the software industry, and they're saying like, I just want to code, all day, every day. But then I ask more questions, and then they're like, well, I want to have more influence, or I want to provide more value, or I want to, they want to make sure that they are leveraging all their skills the best way they could, and they're also providing a lot of value. They want the next promotion, or they want more money, or whatever motivates you. A lot of people want to go to that next level, but they kind of are stuck and wonder, like, what can I do? And I saw that question in the chat. It's like, I thought I'm doing everything right. I can write the code. I can do all this stuff. Why aren't I coming to the next level? Why aren't I more fulfilled? Or they're looking for more fulfillment. And with that, a lot of times it does come to working well with others and having more, providing more value for your company, basically, because that's how you're going to get more money, is if you're providing more value and you're causing the company to have more profit and all the stuff down. If we come down to the money, then you're going to be in a higher position or a more powerful position, or so on and so forth. But on the human element, the more fulfilled you are at your job, the better you're going to do at it too. So from my perspective, I feel like we're all searching for a way to get better at something, and especially if you take pride in your career. For me, it's something really important, and I'm assuming if anyone is tuning into this session, they probably care a little bit too. So yeah, that's kind of my thoughts on that.
Anyone else?
I saw Mala's not on mute, so I was waiting.
Yeah.
Helen, go on.
Okay. I'm trying to. What was the exact question? Because now I've got sidetracked by everything Dalia just said, and I went on a tangent on that. I'm like, wait, what was the original question?
I'm trying to decide how targeted to be and how much to follow each display. The question was like, how can the non-technical skills level up, and why do we care about leveling up? Why is that even important? What does leveling up mean to you?
Okay, so I mean, Dalia, you already touched on this, but leveling up is about that, or for me, leveling up is about that thing that isn't fulfilled. It's the thing you moan about when you go to the pub back in the time that we could do that. It's the thing, it's the money, or it's the project, or it's the technology, or it's the thing that irks you about your job. It's the thing that potentially you could change if, you were allowed, and indeed you had the time to invest in some other areas of your career. That's what they mean to me. It's the thing that motivates you that isn't met, and that's going to be different for everyone, of course.
Mala.
Yes, so I would say the non-technical skills, and we care about them because this is something which we realize that we are missing when we get stuck on, let's say, our project or anything. And when we see our peers or any other person who has the same technical skills, but they are way ahead of us, then we are kind of introspecting or asking ourselves, what is it that the other person has that I don't, and how can I reach that level? So it's more about the confusions that we have, the questions that we have, and the answers are non-technical skills and not the technical skills. And that's the reason why I think even if a lot of developers say they do not care about the soft skills because that's not their forte, and they are doing very well with the coding skills that they have, probably they are missing out on a lot of things, and probably they should look around more, and then they would be able to kind of figure out what is it that they're missing, how are others who are way ahead of them, and why they are. And that's the answers would kind of give them the reasons to level up on the non-technical skills.
I agree with that. I know that in the past, when I was like purely technical in the early stages of my career, I found it frustrating that people who could present themselves well were doing better than I was. And I'm like, but I think I'm actually better at my job. And it took me a long time to realize, like, there's this whole fake it till you make it, which no one wants to be. And Helen mentioned authenticity. And so it's people like us, I think, find it hard we don't want to just go out there and like tell everyone you're awesome. It should be enough to just be awesome. But the thing is that no one's going to know that you're good at what you do if you don't like do something to demonstrate. We've been talking about value, but something to demonstrate value, something to make you look good. And unfortunately, the great lines of code that you write are never going to demonstrate that to the person who's interviewing you, the person who's reading you on Twitter, the person who is responsible for promotions. Like even your boss probably does not read your code. And what's more important to them is, did you present your ideas sensibly? Did you have a collaborative conversation with your team, or was it like an argumentative conversation with your team? Do you bring the team with you when you have great ideas? Have you communicated to the stakeholders, whatever that means? Like a lot of my skills, we'll talk about this a bit later, but a lot of my skills are around the communication side of stuff because my experience was I was not very good at that. And so, yes, it is frustrating to look at other people who are doing better purely because of the non-technical skills. But we actually need these non-technical skills to be good at our job, like asking users what it is they need, asking business analysts, what did you mean when you wrote this down on a piece of paper? But it's also, when it comes to things like getting a new job or getting ahead in your current job, no one's reading your code. That's not the thing people are measuring you on, for better or for worse. And so it's not good enough to be good at your job. You also have to look good at your job as well. And that requires non-technical skills. And why does this matter? Because if you're happy doing your job, that's fine. But the majority of people, particularly early in their careers, are probably not that happy with their job, right? So if you level up your skills, if you level up looking as good as you actually are, that allows you to find the place in your organization or to find the job that's the right job for you, that values you for who you are. And that's why it's important, so you can get a job that makes you happy.
Okay, I'm just going to jump in because I've got a momentary pause. I just wanted to pick up on something really interesting that you said, Mala, and it's something that I've noticed in some of my roles within the technical industry. In that, sometimes developers a lot of the times have incredible soft skills. There I am using the term that I hate. But what I've seen, not a lot, but I've definitely seen it, is because the organization doesn't necessarily value those skills, sometimes they try and stifle them as well. And it's almost as though developers sometimes don't want to be proud of the fact that we have those skills and they can do amazing and wondrous things for us in our careers, but sometimes the wider business don't necessarily recognize them for the hugely valuable asset that they are. And I've definitely seen, and I think to some extent I've been in that place myself. I've not necessarily realized how good at a potential soft skill I am until somebody's actually pointed it out to me and I've gone, oh yeah, good point. Never really thought about that. So I'm so glad we did the planning yesterday because I totally didn't think of this. That's something else that I wanted to kind of call out, is that a lot of the time we are excellent at one or more of these skills. I'm just going to stop saying soft skills. We are excellent at one or more of these skills, but sometimes it takes somebody else to actually point that out to us and say, not everybody has that skill. Use it to your advantage.
I have a talk called Career Advice for Programmers, which I've trotted out multiple times, and it's different every time. But in one version of that talk, I talked about, like, the skills that are important for architects and senior developers are asking questions, communication skills, all of these kind of soft skills, leveling up, mentoring, all that kind of thing. But I point out something there, Helen, like some of the organizations that do value these types of skills will then try and put you into a role which only uses those types of skills. And I've seen that particularly with women at mid-development level. They will often end up in project management or business analysis roles because they've got such great communication skills that the best way for them to be valued is to be doing a different type of role. And that actually is an important tightrope to walk there, I think.
I have a different opinion here, because I think I hear a lot of developers talking about it, that my organization doesn't value the skill that I have. I think it's up to the individuals to take a decision and stand up to the decision that they make, to take up the responsibility of the consequences, because a lot of time it's kind of easy to blame the other person for not allowing us to do certain things, but it's difficult to take a decision, stand by it. Of course, fail. It's okay to fail, but take the responsibility. Yes, I made a choice and I failed. That's okay. But stand up and take a decision for yourself. And that is regardless of the level that you are at now, whether you are a new developer or you have, let's say, 2 decades of experience. But do that, people. It's really important.
That was one of the soft skills non-technical skills that came up yesterday, wasn't it? Bravery. Yes. This idea of being able to stand up for what we believe in, whether it's like a technical design that we think we're like, no, I'm right about this, or whether it's more about protecting yourself in terms of like, no, this is not the right team for me to work for, or no, I need to move to a new job, or I need to go for a promotion. Like, it's difficult. It is very hard, and it is a skill that you need, because if you want to grow, you do have to push yourself, and that is scary. Right, so why don't we move on to some of these skills, because we keep like dropping stuff in. I don't want to have like, why don't we go around and list each individual skill? But I do want to. Why don't we do the questions we talked about? So Mala, we'll start with you. You have authored how many books?
6. 4 with Manning, 1 with Pact, and 1 with O'Reilly.
Me and Helen are trying to write one book, and it's taking us the longest time. What have you learned from the experience of authoring those 6 books? In terms of like the balance of, because the books are all technical, aren't they? They're all technical books.
Mm-mm.
But you obviously you need some non-technical skills in order to be successful in the book authoring stuff. So talk us through that.
Absolutely, and that's a great question because I can't fake it through 6 books. So obviously, writing them required a lot of technical skills. However, there were a lot of other aspects which I consider life-saving, or you could say career-saving. So let me start with asking the right questions. Because talking about why do we want to do certain things before getting down to how we want to do that, it's a very important skills, absolutely crucial when we are writing a book. Like addressing questions, why do we want to write the book? And because we would have such questions coming up every now and then. Should I include this topic in the book? Should I not include it? Should I drop it? Why should I drop it? Why should people even read my book? And the other one is communication. They could be your biggest enemy in any profession, really, but they can kill your career as an author because you don't have a captive audience. And the third one that I want to talk about is people. They are the most important. We need mentors in our life. We need a support system so that all the plans that we have in our head, they materialize and they do not remain aspirational. And I'm really blessed to have that person as my husband, Dheeraj. He is my go-to person for everything that I need anytime. And last, but of course not the least, is volunteering with the community at whatever level that may be. In my personal opinion, it's an important character building factor because I started to work with the Delhi Jug after the release of my first book. And communities like this, they offer visibility and connect us with other professionals from whom we can learn so much more. So I think that's the list of the non-technical skills that have really helped me in the process of writing the book. Of course, I can go into detail for each and every point, but that would be a lot.
I think, and you've mentioned so many things there, and they are like, writing a book is, you need the same skills as writing code. And you're talking about things like people, you're talking about things like learning, like continuous learning, you're talking about empathy, you're talking about your audience. One of the things that I think that we undervalue as developers, we often talk about writing readable code, but we don't talk about like what that really means. And of course it means empathy. It means like, who is the person who's coming to this code? What's their mindset? What are they thinking? What do they want to know? The same as the book. Like, what questions do they have? How am I helping to answer those questions or not?
Absolutely.
And I think asking the right questions is one of my favorite skills, non-technical skills. The more senior you get, the more important that you realize that asking the right questions to the right people is what gives you the right answers. As developers, was it you, Mala, who said about like, we have all the answers, we need to be asking the right questions? And as a developer, you can get the computer to do, like, in theory, whatever you want it to do, but you've got to get it to do the right thing, and you don't know what that is if you don't ask the right questions.
Absolutely, Trisha. I remember we both were having a conversation regarding, I don't remember the topic, but when we were asking questions to each other, we could kind of figure out what we were talking about, what did we want to have in that. Probably it was about one of the conferences that we organized. So by asking questions, we were able to get the answers. So we had the answers. So that's the funny part. We know the answers. It's how we get the answers out and how do we learn about the answers that we already know. So it could be the same like when you visit a doctor, that could be for your mental health or for your physical health. The doctor asks you the questions to get the answers that you already know. And of course, a lot of diagnosis is also included, but he knows, or he or she knows how to ask the right questions. So that's an important skill.
Dalia, I wanted to come to you next because Mala mentioned people and like networking and talking to people and that kind of thing. So your experiences as a tech lead, obviously you had to have a bunch of, I assume you had a bunch of like people in communication and soft skills. I'm saying soft skills now. We were using the term non-technical before, and now I keep saying soft skills. What in your experience as a tech lead, what have you seen in terms of the impact of individual developers' abilities at non-technical skills? Like, what non-technical skills make team members successful? What lack of non-technical skills makes team members less successful?
Yeah, I was like thinking about this, and I was thinking, back when I was even suggested to take the dev lead position, and I had less years than other people. I was wondering, like, okay, why did they pick me? And then when I was put in that position, I was like, okay, so they value this and that and this. And this is why this was really important to them. And I'm going to kind of try to summarize some of the things that I found was really important. And I've also used that to suggest other people be in those leadership positions as well. So if you're sitting here and like wondering, okay, what can I do to get to that next level leadership wise, here are some of the things that have really worked well, for at least for me. First thing is being able to work well with others. So every time you get the opportunity to interact with someone else that is on your team or outside of your team, are you leaving them feeling like, okay, this was a good experience, we worked well together, we solved the problem, and it was they left feeling good, or not? Because that reputation will trickle through the organization. Same thing with the community. Are you leaving people feeling good about themselves and the problem that you solved with them? Because a problem is going to be a problem. You can come out of solving that problem feeling good, or you can come out of it feeling like, okay, this was really painful and I don't want to work with that person again. And I'm not going to pick someone in a leadership position where they're going to subject that to the rest of their team. We've probably all had those team leads that just care about, all right, well, here's the problem, let's just solve it, instead of like picking people up and like being pleasant to work with. So first question is, are you pleasant to work with? Are you leaving people feeling good after they work with you? Another thing is, are you taking ownership over what you're doing, or are you blaming everything on like everyone else? Yeah, sometimes the organization itself sucks, or there are certain things that are not working. But if they're still in business and they're still going, there's probably some good things. And if you're always pointing out the problems and never being part of the solution, like that's not what people are going to be looking for in their leadership. They're going to look for people that are honest about what the problems are, but also are going to be willing to solve it and pick up some of the ownership and say, okay, I'm going to be part of the solution. And I've seen some comments here and there asking about like the organization just kind of it's crappy and all this stuff. Well, you either need to get out of there, or you need to recognize the things that are good about the organization and promote it and be part of that change, because you have some influence. You are part of that organization. So, the learned helplessness can get us really down, and that's a lot of what leads to burnout and like mental anguish. But you can like go back and think, okay, I can be part of this, solving this problem, or I can leave. So that's just one thing, is also ownership. Something else that I was actually had to really debate when I was recommending certain people to leadership positions is how well do they handle pressure. That's one of the biggest things that is going to distinguish you. Do you buckle up and kind of get really stressed and lash out on your teammates? Or do you sit down, ask people for help, kind of try to be constructive about the issues that are happening and think about, okay, next time I'm going to do this and that to prevent this. So ask yourself, when you are under pressure, are people around you feeling crappier, or are they feeling like, okay, we're going to get out of this, we're going to solve this because here's the things that we're going to do? Or are you stressing everyone else out because you're under stress, which, we've done every once in a while, but it's really important that a leader is going to be making people around them not feel as pressured and not feel as crappy about their job. And a lot of it has to do with going from an I, like how can I, to we. How can my team succeed? How can my organization succeed? How can what can I do to advocate for others? That's another big one. Are you promoting other people's work? Are you telling them they're doing a great job? Like, that's one of the biggest things that have gotten me a lot farther is if I see someone doing a really nice job with something, I go ahead and tell them. Like, I don't just say from far away, like, this person is really great. No, I tell them, like, I thought you did a great job on this and that and this. And I've built really good relationships just from that first statement because we've just continued to talk from there. Making people feel like they're valued and that they provide value is a big one too. Asking the right questions and not being afraid to ask. A lot of times I was sitting in rooms where I'm the only one asking questions and I was like, should I just shut up? But then I was like, no, these questions need to be asked if we're going to get anywhere, if we're going to solve this problem. So not being afraid to ask questions, making sure you're asking the right people the right questions, that comes back to communication. But yeah, I think the biggest one is asking questions and making sure that you're not just sitting back and saying, this is not my problem. This is everyone's problem. You're part of it. Let's just get down to business and get it done.
I liked all of your points. I liked what you're saying about instead of I, like we. That's definitely a leadership type of thing. I love what you're saying about like not stressing out the team if you're a leader. So it's not cool for me to call you up and cry all over you when I'm stressed, or is that
fine? That's fine. As long as we get it done the day of.
That's okay. Helen, I wanted to get your take on this because I really like Dalia's take on these are skills like. These are important skills across the board, but like you were thinking particularly in terms of like promotion to leadership or at least like perhaps a bit more responsibility. Helen, I wanted to ask you, like you've been in a technical organization outside the development team in a number of different roles, particularly as technical writer. But as a technical writer or someone else, another technical person outside the development team, you are in a unique position to be able to say like, which of these developers are doing a good job from your point of view might not be the leader. Which of these developers are doing a good job from your point of view, and what are the sort of non-technical skills which have helped give that impression of competence outside of the team to someone who's not a developer on that team?
Yeah, my answer is terribly cliche for this one, so I will expand on it, but it is communication. So when you're working on the peripheries and you're working with the development team, the developers and the communication, let's just broadly split it into two categories. You've got your verbal and you've got your written. I'm going to do verbal first, but I think it's really important to be able to say to someone, I'm not in a place where I can talk about this right now. Can we do 3 o'clock? Can we do tomorrow? What do you need? Because everybody is thankfully different and we all like to be approached and worked with differently. So some people might like a quick cup of coffee and a chat. I keep thinking pre-COVID at their desk. Somebody else might prefer a much more formal meeting, scheduled in a calendar, expectations set, etc., and so forth. Somebody might want to review some content that you've created 2 weeks before the release. Somebody else might be fine with you rocking up, 2 hours before the release is going out the door and saying, can you just proof these release notes and make sure they're right? Everybody is different. So the verbal communication of being able to say, I'm okay to do this right now, or I'm not okay to do this, that really made a difference. Because if you're in a situation where somebody's not expressing what they want you to do or what they don't want you to do, more importantly, that can lead to a quite uncomfortable situation, because you can walk away going, well, what did I do? Why did they react that way if they're not communicating to you? Verbal communication is also a really important one for advocating for yourself as well. I know I've seen a few comments in the chat about money and salary. Verbal communication is crucial if you're going to go into some kind of salary negotiation. You want to be able to evidence why you're asking for this presumably salary increase and explain accurately, again, with evidence, why you're worthy of that. So having that having those verbal communication skills to advocate for yourself and to tell others how you want to be interacted with is really important, because that's going to improve your work life. Because if you've got somebody constantly pestering you and actually you hate it and you never tell that person, you're just going to be miserable. So it's much better to just set expectations up front. The other one would be written. So written communication skills, obviously CVs, they're important. Written communication skills help with those, but more importantly, it's the stuff that we have to do in our day job, like writing a business case for upgrading to Java 17. It might happen, I'm not sure, but it's not just about saying performance and security. It's about selling what you want to do or why the business shouldn't do that thing. So it's about fleshing out the argument and putting it in terms, again, this comes down to empathy. It's putting it in terms that the reader is going to understand. They're probably not a developer, so you're going to need to understand their vocab and put it in such a way that you present the pros, you present the cons, you present the outcomes, and especially if somebody else is making that choice, you have to give them all the information in a clear and unambiguous and unskewed way. So communication, both verbal and written, for me would be the most important skill that I've seen. And again, I suppose verbal, you can go on to giving talks and you can expand that an awful lot more, but in the interest of time, I'll stop talking.
I love what Helen said about the Java 17 thing, because one of the first questions I've gotten in a conference talking about migrating is, how do I convince my manager that we need to do this? Right. And I'm like, I want to ask them, like, what does your manager care about? Do they care about like the bottom line? Do they care about like the security fixes? Like, depending on that, you can get them to agree to it. It's just going to be wondering, okay, what are they gonna respond to best? And that goes back to your communication skill comment.
100%. Yep.
Yeah, this all circles back to what Mala started with in terms of know your audience. And it's with written communication, of course, knowing your audience is really, really important, whether you're writing a book or a report or whatever. But again, with if you're trying to sell yourself for more salary, you need to understand the audience. You need to be able to understand what they want and what you can offer them in order to negotiate that higher salary. In terms of just writing code, like I said, if your aim is to write readable code, you have to understand what your audience thinks is readable. If you're going to do, Helen and I did an exercise this morning about taking a piece of like, it's basically pre-Java, it's like Java 5 code. And we took the Java 5 code and we were like, we don't understand this. So we like brought it all the way up to Java 16. And I put like vars in there, and we used streams and we used records and we used like, accidentally really, there was the right place to use the modern versions of Java. And it's only a small bit of code. But you could argue, and I found that more readable, me and Helen did, because we've been using a lot of modern Java. But I think if we send that back to the original author, I think they're going to be like, I don't know what this is. It's using a whole bunch of APIs in terms of the streams API, new methods on map. It's got naming. The API methods are not super understandable if you don't know what they mean. You're using var instead of declaring the types, which people might find like not very clear. So it's really important to understand your audience, whatever it is you're doing in terms of communicating via verbal, written, and code is included in what I call written communication. And the other thing I want to say about, because communication is like my number one non-technical skill. I used to read a lot of CVs, resumes, CVs, whatever you want to call them. I used to read a lot because I used to do the CV screening at my old job. And everybody, and I mean everybody, puts excellent communication skills on their resume. Every single person. And I started to just ignore that line because I'm like, well, you're not going to say, oh, I've got really bad communication skills, actually. What I really started to realize over time is that communication skills, like technical skills, you could fill 2 pages of what your communication skills are. Helen's already talked about verbal versus written, but written comes across a whole range of categories too. Mala's talked about books. We've talked about blog posts. Helen was talking about writing perhaps like a sales pitch document to your management. I think a lot about Slack, because Slack, you really have to understand the audience in terms of like, how are you going to get what you want out of this communication? JetBrains has a particular communication style on Slack, which I quite like because it's quite terse. And so you don't have a lot of, hey, how are you? How's it going? You don't warm up the audience before you ask, hey, I really need this thing. But like if you've come from another organization where you have a lot more, hey, how's it going? Then that might be considered quite rude. Like, okay, but do you care how my weekend went or what? You know, so these different communication channels require different communication skills. And if you're going to put on your resume excellent communication skills, I want to see some specific examples of something you did. I wrote 3 paragraphs of text which convinced my manager to move to Java 17. Or I am the go-to person for my team to communicate via Slack with the customer because I'm the only person who gets what the team wants from the customer. Or I'm the person who sits down with the user and asks them questions about how they use the application because I can understand what they're saying. Like, these are all very different skills. So good communication skills is not good enough from my point of view. See, I told you we get a Trish rant in there somewhere.
Awesome.
Excellent.
We never doubted you.
I know. I just saved it up for the end.
I was thinking that I'm not asking Trisha about how her weekend goes after this moment.
I know, right?
I don't have time to answer that question. I'm too busy doing stuff.
I want to add another aspect to the communication point that we were talking about. It's about the email communication. How do we communicate when we send email to, let's say, a known person or a person that we haven't talked with earlier? And I want to bring up one specific instance when I was sending out the book proposals to the publishers. So I remember one instance quite vividly. I asked Dheeraj, my husband, to review one of the proposals that I was sending out to the publisher. And he was busy at the time. He said, can you just email that to me? I said, yes, I will do that. And when he came back home, I said, did you get an opportunity to review that email that I sent you? Was the text okay? He said, Mala, I would not have read the email if it wasn't you. I said, what happened? He said, I get hundreds of emails every day, and that's not the only work that I do. I even use my phone to scroll through the emails, and then I get a fraction of a second to decide whether I want to even open that email. So you have just 6 to 7 words in the subject line, up to 20 words in the first 2 lines to convince me to open that email. And your proposal could be excellent. The book content could be great. The chapter could be amazing. But what if the publisher doesn't even open your email? And you're talking about the best publisher out there. So it was that point that I am very kind of aware of what I'm writing to a person. How am I writing? In the first 2 lines, I should tell the other person what is it that why they should open the email and what is it that I want from them. And because the kind of world that we are living in now, we are working in remote teams. So email communication becomes really more important now. And of course, when we are working with colleagues, we do read even the emails which are not written well properly. But believe me, working with colleagues who write good, clear, and concise emails, it's like having kids who are well behaved. So that's really an important skill. Trisha is smiling because I know she understands.
My kids are well behaved. Yes, and I completely agree with that. I also want to flip it on its head. So a lot of us get asked for a lot of stuff. We get emails from conferences or people who want stuff from us, and as advocates, we actually want to help a lot of these people, whether it's like mentoring advice or like speaking at a conference or whatever. Often we want to take the time to write a really good email in response to that. We really want to think about it. And I have fairly recently, and this circles back to what people have been saying about saying no. Mala, you said about saying no, but I know that Helen and Dalia as well, like the saying no thing is a really important skill too. If you're going to say no to something, say no quickly and just send it. Be polite, of course. But like someone says, can you speak at this conference? Then you say, it sounds like a great opportunity, but I can't. And you don't have to justify anything. If you're going to say no, if you're going to push back on something, if somebody wants something from you, but you're not beholden to them, they're not your boss or your highest paying customer, it's absolutely acceptable it's way better to be quick in your communication than to be flowery or amazingly apologetic about stuff. So this is another thing. Speed of communication is important too. So sometimes it's much better to dash off a couple of lines of, hey, look, this is really important. Can you send me this? Or a couple of lines of, no, I can't do that for you, because the response time is more important than the actual content of the email.
Yeah. I was going to say, like, that's really important. Like in my position, the biggest thing was when you're talking to management, being able to say, we can't pick up more features, we can't pick up this more work. I know it's important to the company, but here is why. Whether that's a lot of reason why we do estimating, even though it's kind of a sucky thing and no one gets it right, we still do it because you want to be able to communicate that it's just not possible with the number of people that we have to do this job. And being able to communicate that early on and do risk management early on with management is going to be crucial if you're part of a team. So that, yeah, definitely saying no is a big skill.
You were all right. We are going to run out of time much sooner than I expected. We got about 10 minutes left. The things I wanted to cover that we haven't covered yet is we wanted to cover a little bit about how can we get these skills and how can we practice these skills. Now, this is kind of difficult because you can get these skills and practice them in your day job, but if you're kind of used to working in a particular way and you just carry on doing the same things, without conscious effort, you're not necessarily going to try new stuff and practice new things. On the other hand, when we're talking about soft skills like good communication skills, it's a bit difficult to say, go on this course and do this thing. So we wanted to fling out some ideas of like some ideas of things that we have found that help us to grow in these non-technical areas. I'm going to start with you, Helen, because I don't think I've started with you yet.
Woohoo! Okay, so tip to grow in these areas, mine would be create content. So what do I mean by that? I mean, whatever kind of content you are most comfortable with. So that can be giving talks, that can be creating videos, even TikTok, I believe that's the thing. Creating blog posts, whatever works for you, whatever you feel most comfortable with. Why do that? Because it is going to not only enhance your knowledge of the subject, whatever you are talking about or writing about or recording about, it's going to enhance your knowledge, but it's also going to help other people in the community because everybody is on a journey. Everybody is on a journey. So you don't need to be an expert to do that stuff. You just need to have been on a journey, and that journey can be a week long. That can be, I really tried to figure this technology out with this tool, and you know what? It doesn't work, and I can't figure it out, and I don't know why. Because that kind of content is really useful because you can bet there's dozens of developers out there going, this doesn't work. I'm not really sure why, and nobody's brave enough to go, I can't get it to work. So creating content, whatever you're comfortable with, it's going to hone your communication skills, whether it's verbal or written, depending on the type of content you're creating. It's going to help the wider community as well, and it's going to increase your network, which is really important because it can be a lonely old place, especially now, and networking is more people and more opportunities.
Basically a plan with no flaws.
Exactly.
Dalia, your top tips for obtaining and growing non-technical skills?
For me, the biggest thing that has changed my career is having good mentors. I look at it as, for technical skills, you can go off and Google and find out what the problem is. But for non-technical skills, like, every situation is unique, and a lot of times I just need to sit down and talk to someone. So my mentors have become my Google, basically, for how can I improve in this area. I've gone to different people for different issues that I've had, and I've, without knowing it, built a really good network around me of people that I admire, and they're willing to help me grow. So my advice to anyone out there is find someone that you really admire or really like what they do. Go tell them that you think they're doing a really good job with that, and ask them for a mentor meeting. Bring your questions, things that you've struggled with in the past, and ask them, like, how would you handle this? Like, what can I do to do this better? Or all of this stuff. And don't just limit it to one person. Just keep searching and keep building that network until you find people that are willing to give you that feedback and willing to spend that time with you, and hang on to them, because those folks are going to be so valuable to you. I'm very grateful for, Kevin Sutter for pushing me and giving me all the career advice that he's given me. And he's one of the people that, I looked at and I asked, all right, I'm facing this problem, and I need to improve my non-technical skills in this area. How would you do this? Or what would you suggest? And then I moved on to other people, and I just kept asking folks to, sit down and talk. And some people it didn't work out. And some people I still talk to them to this day. So definitely surround yourself with good mentors, folks that are going to give you good advice, and people that really are going to invest in your career. That's my biggest advice.
Plus 100 to that. I early on in my career, like I was one of those I'm not going to ask for help type people, and it took me. I was basically stagnant in my career for 10 years. I did okay, but I didn't get anywhere until I started speaking to real individuals. I want to flip that on its head a bit. This is not my piece of advice. This is Trisha butting in with her piece of advice. I want to flip that on its head as well. My experience of being a mentor, even if you're a junior, is really, really valuable. Like, you practice your technical skill, your non-technical skills, you practice communication, you get confidence in the stuff that you've already learned, even if you're only like 1 year out of university or whatever. So mentoring people as well is a really great way to give you confidence and grow. Mala, your top tips for obtaining and growing your non-technical skills?
I would say volunteering, because a lot of time we hear developers saying that we do not know what are the soft skills that I should be looking at, or what are the top non-technical skills that I should be acquiring. So I would say volunteering is a beautiful experience. Connect and volunteer with your local Java user groups, or the other Java user, or the other user groups that you might want to do that. Because the way, have you seen a child play without any pressure? They just pick up what they want to do, just play around and think of things, do things without even thinking about what if this doesn't work. So the same things works when you are volunteering. You can pick up things that you like to work with without having the pressure of performance, of failing, and you can just do. It really helps you to discover or rediscover yourself. And also you get to meet with a lot of people with different varied skills, and you can talk with them. The other beautiful thing is that it's a leveling field, whether you are an fresh graduate from the college or you are the CEO of another company. You can talk with each other like individuals without, again, any pressure, and that really brings out the best in you. And the other thing is that I have done this myself. I've tried out crazy ideas at user groups. Some worked, some didn't, but I had a safety net. And when I know that, okay, I fail and I can get up, that means I'm not dead, I can try that again, and I can bring that experience of not being afraid of failure at work. So one specific example I want to talk about is we started a newsletter, which is Technology Grid at Women Who Code Delhi chapter that I co-lead. And the idea behind the newsletter was to highlight the careers of women who were doing exceptionally well in their career. And I wanted the readers to normalize to see women as leaders with long careers. I'm talking about audience that could be men, women, young and old. And the more you read about and you hear about women in tech, the less unattainable it seems. So, and also perhaps one day we would get rid of all the jokes which talk about using women as examples when they talk about tech ignorance. So, I would say join a user group, because that's where you would find friends who would understand your code as well.
Yes, so I want to agree with that, because joining a user group is my number one thing. That's where I got started presenting. That's where I made my network. That's how I ended up in a position to really grow my non-technical skills and benefit from that growth. But given that you've said user group, I get to say one more thing, which is different, which was, some of the stuff we've talked about is like external to your organization. There are things you can do inside your organization. For example, at one of my previous places, I started lunchtime brown bags on a Monday. I know not everyone wants to give up lunchtimes for stuff, but it's kind of better if you're in the office, which of course a lot of people aren't. If you're in the office, it's a bit better to give up your lunchtime than to spend a lot of extra time in evenings or weekends, especially if you've got family. And spending like a weekday lunchtime either we used to do a bunch of different things, like showcasing an area of the code, which perhaps it took us a while to get. We used to pair. If we paired on something, it took us a little while to figure out what was going on. We might then demo that to the rest of the team to be like, hey, there's this knotty area of the code. This is what we think it does. Or if we're trying out a new technology, we might talk about a new technology. We might do roundtable stuff on things like, how do we think we can go forward on some topic? And also book clubs. So similarly, like, why don't we just go away this week and read? All of us will read one chapter of a book, come back next week and feedback on that one chapter, so you don't have to read the whole book. And that way you can kind of blend a whole bunch of different skills like reading and learning and talking and communicating and getting to know your team in a slightly different way than when you're just ping-ponging code reviews and you absolutely hate how the other person wrote the code. We have 0 time for questions. Who would have known? We have been pinging questions, answering questions a little bit on the chat. I'm really pleased to see how much engagement there was on the chat there. Is engagement a marketing word? I'm happy to see how chatty everyone was. You can see all of our Twitter handles on there. So, of course, you can ask us questions anytime. This has been a really interesting topic that we all care about. I kind of feel like we should find a way to share what we talked about today in another format as well. Like, even if we just do a transcript of this or something, or maybe, I don't know. So, yeah, anything, we might share this elsewhere. However, we have run out of time and we still need to do next episode. The next episode is going to be staying ahead of the curve, which is kind of like this, but it's on the technical side. So how do we stay ahead in our technical skills? It's a good month to do it next month because Java 17 is coming out. So then we get to talk about, like, should we care about Java 17? How do we learn about Java 17? But also, like, how do we stay on top of this pace, particularly Java coming out every 6 months? JavaScript frameworks seem to change every 30 seconds. Like, how do we handle this? So the 4 of us are going to be here again talking about how we stay up to date in terms of technology and how we handle that pressure of the really quickly changing technology landscape. That is on the 30th of September. So if you thought this episode came around quickly, the next one's not going to come around quickly because it's in like practically 2 months' time. But that's the way it's rolled this time round. On top of that, we'll have 2 live streams between then. We're going to have Test Containers live stream next week, right, Mala?
Yes, that's right.
And another one in September on
14th, I guess.
Yeah, okay, and that will be the Java 17 one, right?
That's right.
Perfect. Awesome. So yes, subscribe to our YouTube channel so you can get all of those things. Do come back next month. And what else? Follow us on Twitter for announcements. And yes, and ping us any ideas on topics you want to see us talk about, because I'm seeing, I'm very gratified by a lot of people saying that this was a useful session. So we're happy to talk about any other topics that you think of based off this. Anything anyone else wants to say to wrap up?
Just one skill that I really wanted to talk about, but of course we didn't have the time. I feel respect is very important. Respect yourself, others, the people that you work with. You're right, actually. And respect is so important to us that we actually put it in the tag for the show, didn't we? We were like, this is a respectful discussion. Great. Thank you very much for being on the stream, Mala, Helen, Dalia, and me. And thank you very much to the audience who've turned up, because you've been absolutely amazing. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Thanks. Bye.
Thanks. Bye-bye.